In the HBO TV show Chernobyl, the main character, chain smoker Austin Powers, reveals that the control rods are made of boron.
These rods are made of boron, which reduces reactivity, but not the tips.
A material that absorbs free neutrons, therefore limiting reactivity in the nuclear reactor. However, the tips are made of graphite.
The tips are made of graphite,
which accelerates it. The general then asks,
why?
Which is a very good question, considering the very thing you have designed to reduce a reaction should not, in typically sensible fashion, be made of something that does the exact opposite. Austin tells us,
it's cheaper.
But that feels like an unsatisfactory answer to me. Are you telling me there is not a single material on this planet which is durable enough to be in a reactor and serve its purpose, holding a control rod tip? Together, also not accelerate the reaction, and also be at the same price or cheaper than graphite. I feel like reaction slowing is the main feature of this product, so if you could have it in your way and make it out of the purely cheapest item possible, you'd use steel or something. But if you're making it out of a specialty material like graphite, I'm not gonna choose graphite to make my house out of, for example. This is not the most easily accessible item by a long shot. I can name like 5 different metals that you could probably source much easier. If you're using a niche material like graphite, why make it one that accelerates this reaction? Naturally, no one had a good reason to give me, so it was up to me and my good friend, the internet, to figure this one out. Graphite does not accelerate the reaction how you might be imagining. It is what is called a moderator. The neutrons flying around inside the reactor are whizzing at ludicrous speed, and graphite slows them down ever so slightly. This actually makes it easier for them to hit another uranium atom and split it, which is the entire idea of a reactor, and so the chance of reaction is higher, so more reactions occur. Separate from the control rods, which were physical rods meant to absorb the neutrons rather than just slow them down. These other physical rods were called moderators, which were placed at various points inside the reactor to facilitate this slowing down but not stopping of the neutrons. While a control rod is like a roadblock, a moderator is like a speed bump. The control rods have hollow channels that they slot into the reactor like puzzle pieces, and they can be raised or lowered into these otherwise empty cavities inside said reactor. However, if they're pulled out of the reactor, there would be what would be essentially a hollow tube with nothing in it where the control rod could be but isn't. A reactor has water flowing all around the uranium rods permanently sitting inside that space, so water would essentially just rush to fill that gap when the control rod wasn't there or lifted out. The problem is, water absorbs neutrons and slows down the reactivity, almost just like a control rod anyway. A reactor is so fickle and sensitive to differences that even this small region with just water is enough to essentially stop any reactivity in that part, and the reactor couldn't function. See, these devices are calibrated down to the micrometer, and without even distribution of neutrons being absorbed by all this extra water in this empty channel for the control rod specifically, the reaction wouldn't happen. So they actually did need a thing hanging off the bottom of the control rod, that when the control rod was lifted out or removed from the reactor, there was something still physical, something that wasn't water, that could basically fill that gap and took up the empty space of the channel where the control rod could be inserted. We use a moderator to slow down the reaction but not absorb the neutrons. Remember, speed bump, not roadblock. We use graphite, so we aren't killing the reaction like water, we're actually promoting the reactivity in that local zone since there's no uranium here. There is an inert metal being graphite. This ensures reactivity is fairly uniform across the reactor, which is again essential for this once again, basically a very temperamental boiler. When I first watched the scene, I was imagining the graphite tip being like a physical end of the control rod, how a drill bit can be diamond tipped, so at the end of it is diamond. But no, the graphite in this case was not a tip of the control rod, it was actually an entirely separate rod that basically dangled off the bottom of the control rod. The control rod did explicitly stop the reaction and stop it no matter what. It's just that we had this thing dangling below it that kept the water out of the reactor, that being attached to the control rod needed to go wherever we wanted to put the control rod first. It needed to be inserted first, and actually was for the most part already inserted into the reactor, as that is its entire purpose. So it slowed down the neutrons when it got deeper and deeper into the reactor, which increased collisions well before the control rod could replace it in the space. The next second you know, more and more collisions, and in a split second, explosion. So HBO abstracts a lot of this, and really doesn't make it necessarily clear this is why it's so-called cheaper and easier, but it's because we did need something that actually accelerated the reaction to be there, rather than just an inert item. So I hope this has been interesting, and I hope if you were like me and were really confused about this point being emphasized in the TV show, it all makes sense now. Thank you.